It's like the Big Bang event for Tree House. Canning was the Big Bang. Like its rapid expansion is the thing that's still resonating in 2025. Without that seminal moment of canning, without that energy that came from those early nascent days of Tree House, like what you see now would not be possible. It's kinetic energy from a time that, you know, the people who participated in it will never forget.
You could just feel the excitement in the building. It's loud, they're brewing, it's steamy in there.
There were times where things didn't go well.
We spent anywhere between 10 and 12 hours a day on that canning line.
That can line and that facility is so small compared to where we are now.
Working the canning line was an experience that I will never forget.
We had our little can line mascots, a little aerial toy. And
But the joke at the time was, why don't you just make more? And from the outside, it's like, why don't you just make more? And I'm killing myself. Everyone involved at the time is full gas, full bore, totally dedicated, 7 days a week. Afterburners on, we're sold out, and there's the one guy, why don't you just make more? And so that's what we're sitting in now, is like we're sitting in the embodiment of why don't you just make more? Tree House has been canning beer for 10 years. The month of February in 2025 marks 10 years since we first put our beer into cans.
When I started working at Tree House, Nate stood me right next to the Wild Goose and said, "Can you stand here?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Can you do it for a year straight?" I said, "I guess so." And he goes, "All right, you got the job." And that's how it started.
When I started at Treehouse, I first got hired to work the can line, which was the original can line in Monson, the Wild Goose.
I remember spending a lot of time with Dan and Andrew Pillsbury. We kind of operated the line in tandem, and we'd chop up the work that way, and it would be myself and one other operator, and Da and Ellen. Da's Nate's dad, and Ellen is Lauren's mom, so got to spend a lot of time with them.
You know, when the canning line came about, it was all hands on deck at that point, you know, from our families. So it was 100% of the time on the canning line until we opened up the retail space for growler fills as well.
Lauren is my daughter, and Nate is my son-in-law. And I've worked at Tree House forever, since the beginning of Tree House, and I'm very proud to say that. I got to work with Nate's dad because he and I were responsible for what happens at the end of the canning line. There was no label maker. So Nate's dad and I had to put the labels on by hand after everything was brought back to the coolers.
my first job at Tree House was parking cars. When I had downtime, I would help out Ellen and Nate's father packaging and bringing the pallets of beer into the cooler and stuff.
I'm Dan Lanyon, Nathan's pop. So when we chased the cans of growlers, it was pretty spectacular. They were selling more beer than we could ever keep up with any later. The canning line, it was not an easy thing.
I remember everything about it. It was called a Wild Goose GC 250 or something like that. Four-head filler, semi-automatic. I think most of the guys you'll interview will say it was fully manual.
Mostly manual. So we would be manually adjusting fill heights and manually adjusting the foam.
Back when we were running the Goose in Monson, it was usually one can operator kind of like standing in front of the thing, and that's kind of what you did, was you just stood literally in front of it and made sure the fills were good, and if there was a mislid, you would get a lid on there. You'd have 2 or 3 people down the line pulling cans off, packing them in cases.
You couldn't leave it. It had to be babysat. You couldn't run to the bathroom. You couldn't grab a quick snack. It was someone had to be there. You're manually adjusting fill heads constantly throughout the run, pulling cans off, getting stuck in the twist rinse. You're hopping up on a ladder, down cans. It was very labor intensive.
We had to physically, feed the canning line compartment itself where it took the cans. We had to feed that in manually. We added pieces throughout to make it more efficient for us on the back end.
Da was always really fun to work with because He was always engineering something on the canning line. The thing was breaking all the time, or, you know, he was always trying to find a better way for it to flow. Was always giving us trouble. Anything you can think of, he's taped to that canning line.
Nate's father, always had something. He would always be able to makeshift or rig up something. You know, whether it be like, you'd look over, there'd be like a pool noodle and some duct tape, but it would work.
Every time the can comes down the line, it trips up somewhere, it falls over and knocks 50 more cans out on the floor. So I'm pretty good at solving problems. You know, like a plumber would use to put on pipes, put that in. We had to straighten it out, get things rolling.
So when you walked in the retail door, which was one door, on your left there was a bar, and on the right there was a half wall, which you were able to see right into the canning line.
The can line in Monson was staged like right in front of where retail was, because there was like literally very little space to sell cans.
We were right where the customers could see.
Can line came in and we're like, okay, we have to put the can line somewhere. So there was like a rope that separated the public from where the can line was, wedged behind some of our smaller tanks in an L shape. And the cool thing about it is that the cans came down, they made their way like directly to the left and into customers' hands. You could stand 3 feet away from the packaging line and you were getting beer that was, you know, exposed to the atmosphere 3 seconds before it was in your hand and you were out the door.
Fresh.
Fresh.
As fresh as it gets, it sounds like.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is it's still the same. Pull it off, Matt. Nice. Happy New Year!
Everybody here has a hidden talent, and it's their choice to promote themselves, to create something new for Tree House. I'm very proud of all these guys.
My current role is inventory control coordinator and logistics coordinator.
Currently, now I'm the specialty beer program manager.
Currently, I am the merchandise manager, so I do all the purchasing for all the storefronts and all the locations that we have.
Now I'm a farmhand, pretty much. There's so many different things.
I think, you know, Canniversary, what comes to my mind is, yes, the canning line, yes, the beer, but it's more the people that were part of that at the very beginning and the people that are still part of that even now.
I definitely didn't see 7 locations in cities in New York. We were also focused on the job at hand and kind of the product, and then the product kind of had a mind of its own and took us to where we are now, I think. But in a small, condensed group, working so hard, so many hours, I think we just thought about the next day and then doing what we had to do and coming in and getting it done, and that stuff kind of happened on its own. So it's been cool.
You know, you come to Tree House, granted we have a much bigger operation, there's a lot more beer in inventory, but we manage it in absolutes. So the beer might be 3 days old, it might be 10 days old, sometimes 15. Always kept cold, always super fresh, but the majority of the beer comes off the packaging line that day and goes straight upstairs and into customers' hands the same way that it had 10 years ago. The reason the Monson Canniversary is so important is that the clear sense of purpose that we had, the seismic energy of the moment, is the reason that Tree House is what it is today. And nostalgia is a rosy thing, but the energy that we have from that moment still reverberates in 2025. And the more that I think about it, the more I'm like deriving energy from that moment now. And I guess that's why we look back. We celebrate the moment and we derive energy from our past. And, you know, what a past we have. 75 million cans later, and here we are, still striving like never before. An endeavor like Tree House takes a village, some of whom have moved on, and many of whom continue to contribute. We have the deepest gratitude for everyone, including you, who have enabled us to do what we love. Happy 10 years to the Tree House Can Line.
was a different time for us all. Like, I had a ponytail running that thing. I'm bald now. Think about that.